So first things first, let's record. We're recording now. All right. So at this point, I've now read, I think, 8 rough draft essays. I've read 8 rough draft essays. I think I've met with 5 students, I think, about their rough drafts. And what we're seeing is that there is a consistent issue that I want to address with you guys right now. Okay. So the consistent issue is on the reflection. On the reflection, what you need to do with your reflection, what I'm finding is that a lot of students don't seem to understand what the reflection is, right? They don't really know what it is very well. Some students are doing a very good job with their reflection, and some students are not, right? So there are 2 main things that you need to put in your reflection, okay? You need to put historical perspective, and you need to put historiography. Okay, those are the 2 things that I'm looking for when I see your reflection. Okay, I put them in the chat there. Now, historical perspective is going to be, you have to analyze your perspective. Okay, so this is the reflection is supposed to be where you are placing your work in the realm of like the history of the world, right? The realm of the work of historians. How do historians go about doing this work? How do they go about figuring this stuff out? Okay, so historical perspective is going to be what students oftentimes mistakenly call bias. Okay, the historical perspective is going to be, it's going to be the perspective through which the historian is looking at the world. The perspective through which the historian is looking at the world. Okay, so a traditional Western way of thinking about the world is what we call kings and queens history, right? Where the Western historians always think that the most important part of a country is going to be whoever's ruling on top and politics and war, right? That's the most important thing. And that's why most history books are about politics and war, right? But politics and war are ignoring significant portions of that society, right? If you give me the history of France and all I look at is this king and 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 this king, right? I never know what it's like to be a child growing up on the streets of Marseille. Like, I'll never know that. It's just not part of the story, right? And you end up looking at history with, like, say, no women in it, right? Because you'll end up looking at history with like no women because there's no women in the kings and stuff like that, right? You get queens once in a while, but you get what I'm saying, okay? So alternatively, if you end up looking at like social history, I have a bunch of students who are writing about things like education systems and stuff like that, right? That's a social history. That's where you're focusing on things like the everyday life of like poor people. Okay, that would be social history, right? You could have feminist history where you're focusing on the relationship between men and women and the power dynamic, specifically the power dynamic of men oppressing women. You could have racial history where you're looking at the social dynamic of power struggles between race. You could have Marxist history where you're dealing with the power dynamics of class, right? Of like the rich over the poor. Okay, in your reflection, you should be able to articulate your perspective. You should be able to articulate your perspective. Now, Yash, I'm going to use you as an example, okay? So I had Yash turned in his paper yesterday, and his paper was really, really, really good. Very, very good. And Yash's paper is on the education system of colonial India, right? That the British imposed this system on India. And Yash has given me this whole paper about it, and it's very, very good. We get to this reflection, and Yash didn't fully understand how historical perspective works, right? And I pointed out to him that he's doing a social history topic, but Yash presented it to me in the form of all like government policies and like colonial government policies and stuff. So Yash used a traditional historical lens to look at a social issue. Does that, you guys with me? You tracking? Okay. So in order for Yash to get full points on his reflection, he needs to be able to recognize that and articulate it. He needs to be able to say what the traditional lens is, how he's using it, and what the limitations are of that. Okay? He doesn't have to go and change this whole paper. That's madness. He just needs to be able to recognize what the bias is, right? That Yash is coming from a perspective of bias anyway. Everyone has a bias. Everyone has this perspective. You just need to find out where you are. Are you guys understanding this? Give me a thumbs up if you think you understand. Mostly understand. Okay. All right. Historiography is the other thing that you need. The historiography is the method of writing history. The method of writing history. Now, how did the person get the information they got? Did they go to the archives of the Vatican and read ancient manuscripts? Did they analyze military records? Did they analyze like health records from hospitals? Did they walk out into the forests of Elaine, Arkansas and dig up the mass graves and count the skulls of the Black people killed in the massacre? Right? Like, you tell me how they went about getting their information. That's the historiography of it. Traditional historiography is all about archives. It's all about like reading the documents of an archive. So I learned about Louis XIV of France by reading the court documents of Louis XIV. Okay, it gives me really good information on Louis XIV and the way his court worked, but it doesn't tell me anything about the woman living in the gutter in Paris. Right? That's the traditional historiography. A non-traditional historiography would be looking at things like economic analysis or analysis of a forgotten group, right? Looking at things like women in Louis XIV's Paris or something like that, or poor people or whatever, right? You're looking at American history from the perspective of Native Americans, or American history from the perspective of Black people, or American history from the perspective of gay people, or something like that, right? That if you're going through that historiography, you need to be able to recognize how you're getting that information, okay? In your reflection, in order to get full points, you need to have both of those things, okay? Does that clear up what the reflection should look like to you? Kira, you look confused. You look apprehensive, Kira.
Well, I'm just confused. So the reflection is you reflecting on your sources that you used?
You're reflecting on the way you have written your history, right? Mm-hmm. The way you've written your history is going to reflect the sources that you've used. So if I'm writing about colonial India, right? And I read 3 books, and all 3 books were from like Hindu nationalists who were opposing the British. That means I'm going to be producing a paper that is an anti-colonial paper, probably, right? And so I need to recognize that because I used 3 anti-colonial sources, the argument that I'm presenting is an anti-colonial argument, right? I don't have to be an Indian peasant in Bengal to write an anti-colonial paper, right? I just need to recognize that the peasants in Bengal wrote these books, okay. Right? I don't have to be a woman to write a feminist paper, right? I can recognize the oppression of women and not be a woman, right? I just have to recognize where my sources are coming from. Okay?
So,
yeah, Ro.
So it's just kind of kind of stating exactly where you stand rather than just providing the information. Like, here's the information, but here's the info and what I think about this certain thing with this info I presented.
Yeah, that's pretty good. You're not necessarily going to say, it's my opinion that colonial India was great, right? You're not going to put that in there. What you're going to say is, right, but the information I'm presenting is coming from a traditional historical perspective because I'm focusing on the role of the government and the role of the people in power over this issue, right? Or the perspective I'm presenting is a mostly traditional sense, but I have a counter argument here that is a social history sense, right? Because this traditional sense is about the government and power, and the social history sense is about you know, recognizing the everyday struggles of, you know, teachers in Calcutta or something like that. Does that make sense? I'm using Yash's paper as my example here, right? But Yash needs to, the way I phrased it to Yash worked is that he needs to be aware of what his bias is, right? And Yash didn't realize this, but he had written a very traditional paper, right? He had written a very traditional paper. It's a very well done, very good paper, Yash. I'm not singling you out for bad stuff. I'm saying you're really good. But it was a traditional style. It was a traditional style, and Yash didn't really realize that he had written in a traditional style until I kind of pointed it out to him, and he's like, oh yeah, I guess I did, right? He needs to be able to recognize that he did. And that's the difference between like an A and a B on a paper, is being able to recognize that. Cool? Are we good? All right, let's get on to the lesson then, ladies and gents. Share my screen with you folks. Sharing my screen with you folks. All right, let's talk segregation. Now, did we do Truman with you guys at all? I don't think we did Truman, right? All right, so let's deal with Truman real quick. Let's deal with Truman real quick. This will be the last we talk about the military. The last we talk about the military. Now, Harry Truman, I think we're on what? L, I think? Big number L?
Like P, I think.
Oh, that's P. Last time we did O, so.
Okay. All right. P. You guys say P? All right, I say P. All right. So big number P, Truman and the civil rights. Harry Truman and the civil rights. Now, do you guys know anything about Truman, really?
No.
Not really? Okay, he was president after. Go ahead, Ro.
I think he wasn't like the best speaker.
Okay. All right. He wasn't the best speaker. Okay. So Truman is kind of famous for being boring, right? So he is this like kind of boring politician that came out of Missouri and was kind of just not offensive to anybody. And Franklin Roosevelt didn't really care for him, but Franklin Roosevelt wanted a vice president that wasn't going to threaten him. So Franklin Roosevelt is this like forceful personality. And so he wanted somebody he can just kind of push around as his vice. And so he gets Truman as his vice president, the third one, right? It's his last term. And Truman basically was not plugged in at all. And then FDR dies 3 months into his term, and suddenly Truman found himself with the ultimate promotion, okay? Truman he was a senator from Missouri. He was a largely forgettable senator from Missouri. And he had no evidence of being like a civil rights guy until he became president. And after the war, he's like, well, if I'm going to be president, I might as well see if I can fix things. So let's do this. So the first thing he does is Executive Order 9981. Executive Order 9981, he does this in 1946. That's not the first thing he does. The first thing he does is find out about the nuclear bomb. He gets sworn in, and like 2 hours later, the military comes up to him and say, President Frankie left you out of the loop, bud. Here's our bomb. And Truman's like, oh, what? Yeah, but after the war ends, he issues Executive Order 9981. Executive Order 9981 desegregates the U.S. military. It desegregates the U.S. military. And it also incorporates women into the military. It incorporates women into all the services. Now, this may not seem like that big of a deal, right? What percentage of the population are soldiers, are in the military? What do you think? Ilha, what do you think, man? What percentage of the population is in the military?
Like very low, like maybe like 5%?
Yeah, 5%. So in the United States, normally, the US population is about 1% veterans, which means we're really only about 0.3% soldiers at any time, right? A pretty low number most of the time. It's a little higher after World War II, of course, but really veterans are only like 1% of the population, okay? So it may not seem like a big deal, but this is a really, really big deal. And it's a big deal for a reason. The military must do this. They don't have a choice. Okay? When you're in the military, if you get ordered to do something, as long as it's not an illegal order, you do it or you go to jail. You must do it. Right? When my commander told me to go sweep the parking lot, I swept the parking lot. I go to jail or I sweep the parking lot. And when I came back in and my commander told me to go do it again, I did it again. And when my commander told me to sweep the parking lot 5 more times that day, I swept it 5 more times that day because I didn't have a choice, because I was a troublemaker and they kept making me sweep the parking lot because I kept causing trouble, right? And so it's a lawful order. You do what you told. And the military told Truman, they said, you can't integrate the forces. How will black soldiers and white soldiers ever learn how to trust each other? They'll never learn. It'll be terrible. And Truman says, suck it up. Do it. He says, do it. Integrate or quit. He says, you can quit, you can go to jail, or you can integrate, but do it now. What ends up happening here is that the military ends up becoming this kind of social experiment. The military becomes a social experiment where the military becomes proof that integration can work. A lot of white America looks at this and they say, huh, I guess it can work. This happened again, right? Obama did it too. What did Obama do with the military? You guys might be a little young for when it happened. You guys probably would have been in like 7th grade. What did he do? Drew?
Did he get rid of the, what's it called? The don't ask, don't tell law
Yeah.
or something like that?
Exactly. And President Obama basically just said, hey, gays are in the military, suck it up, right? And the military said, oh my God, how will we ever serve with gay people? Oh my God. And Obama says, newsflash, you've been serving with gay people for hundreds of years, also shut up. Basically, right? And Obama said, you can quit, you can go to jail, or you can do it. Right? Same kind of a deal. And then the military becomes this integrated force, and the whole country goes, huh, I guess it's not that big of a deal. Right? So this becomes proof to white people that integration can work. Let's be clear here. Proof to white people that were already sympathetic to integration. Truman is going to spend a significant portion of his time trying to fight other racist issues, right? He's going to look at lynching. He's going to try to make lynching a federal crime. He's going to get shot down. Congress will shoot him down. They won't let him do it. He's not going to have a lot of big successes, but the executive order to the military is a big one. That's one that deserves some time. Cool?
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up, Raul?
I'm just really confused why lynching was like not already a crime, because it's
So
killing somebody.
yeah, so lynching is already the crime murder, right? It's already murder. What they're trying to do is get lynching labeled as a special kind of murder, which is like extra illegal, right? So it'll carry bigger penalties with it. That's what they're trying to do. And so it would be what in modern day we would call like a hate crime legislature, right?
Yeah.
The idea here being that lynching is different than murder, right? Just murder is where you kill somebody and you go to jail. Lynching is where you kill somebody as a social message to everyone else, right? And so they're trying to say that the murder is bad enough, but the social message makes it extra bad, right? So where murder would get you, 50 years in prison, lynching gets you 100 years in prison or something like that. Does that make sense, Ro?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what they're trying to do. It was illegal. I mean, it's murder, right? Murder is illegal. Yeah. But they're trying to make it more illegal. All right, so let's deal with segregation. Let's go to Q. Big number Q. Q stands for segregation. Jim Quo. Thank you, Pooja. That's why you're my favorite. The only one who laughed, mind you. All right. Okay. Mike still doesn't get it. That's okay, Mike. You'll catch up eventually. You'll be fine. Okay. So at this point in time, we are at maximum Jim Crow. Okay, maximum Jim Crow. Jim Crow is the nickname for segregation. It's a nickname for segregation. Do you guys know where the name Jim Crow comes from? It was a racist character from the early 1800s. It was a character that minstrel shows used to do, where they would like dress in blackface and like have the white lips, the black face, and they'd wear the white gloves and stuff, and they would like do dances and crap like that. And it was a racist caricature of black people. And Jim Crow was the guy's name, right? It's where Mickey Mouse comes from. Mickey Mouse is a minstrel show character. That's why he's got the black skin with the white gloves, right? It's supposed to be this like funny comedy bit that black people wearing white gloves, like you're supposed to laugh at it the same way that you're supposed to laugh at like a chimpanzee wearing a necktie. You're like, where did that chimpanzee get a necktie? Whoa, it's so wacky, right? Same thing. Where did a black person find white gloves? Whoa, it's so crazy. You get it? It's really funny, huh? Yeah, super funny. Thanks a lot, 1800 racists. All right, so anyway, that's where it comes from. So this is maximum segregation, okay? When we're talking about segregation, we always need to remember what principle did we have from the very first day. It's not about the access to the water, is it? What is it? Kira, what's it about? It's not the water. What is it about?
It's about being above somebody.
Yeah, it's about power and identity, right? Where my identity is more powerful than your identity, and I can tell you what to do, right? Separate but equal is a myth, okay? But it looks like it's true. If you look at the picture here, right? So the drinking fountain over here and the drinking fountain over here are the same water. They're the same pipes. The water's the same temperature. The water tastes the same. The access is the same. They both work, right? On some logical level, you look at it and you say, yeah, the separate is equal. Okay, people make this argument. They'll say, who cares if you're in the back of the bus or the front of the bus? The bus still makes the stop at the same time. You're still equal. We're just separate, right? That argument only works if it's about the resource, right? Segregation is always made to look like it's an argument about resources. Okay, it's made to look like that. That's a lie. It's the lie of segregation, okay? Because they'll say, look, the water's the same. What's your problem, man? The seat on the bus is the same. What's your problem, man? Right? But it's not about that resource, is it? It's about power. And as long as it's about power, it can never be equal. Okay? So we have to deal with how pervasive segregation is. This is something that students have a very, very difficult time understanding, like on a kind of base emotional level. Okay? Think about like over the course of a summer day, right? When you guys aren't in school. It's a normal thing. Like if I were to tell you on my day, I woke up in the morning, I had some breakfast, I said hi to my family, I got dressed, I went to work, you know, at lunchtime I went over to the sandwich shop and I bought a sandwich, and then I finished up the rest of my shift, and then I stopped and I went to grocery shopping and picked up a few things, and then my wife called me, I had to stop by the pharmacy and pick up a prescription, and then like maybe I went to the gas station to go fill up my car, then I went and got it washed, went home, we made dinner, and then like me and the kids and my wife, we all just went to the park, took the dog out to the park and played Frisbee with the dog, right? That feels like a pretty normal day, right? Nothing out of the ordinary. That's a pretty normal day. Sounds like a pretty nice time. Segregation changes every single aspect of that day. Because I go to work and I can't work in the front desk. I have to work in the back desk. And when the customer comes to me, the customer doesn't come to me and ask me, you know, where are the beans? The customer comes to me and says, black person, where are the beans? Black person, I want to buy stamps. Black person, bag my groceries. I go to the sandwich shop and they look at me and they say, black person, what do you want on your sandwich? Right? Every aspect becomes different. Every interaction you have, even with other people of your same race, the interaction is different. You have to understand this on like a really, like a cellular level almost, right? That this is so deeply permeating every aspect of who you are. That it's so big, it's so deep. It would be like somebody walking up to you and telling you that the English language is forbidden now. You now have to speak Japanese, right? Can you even conceive your world without English? It'd be very, very difficult for you to conceive your world without English, right? This is so common that you are attempting to conceive your world without the language. So in your notes, let's put here psychological effects of segregation. And then I want you to make 2 columns. Put black on the left and white on the right. Black on the left and white on the right. Okay, so let's walk through this. What are the psychological effects that segregation is going to have on black people? Mike, why don't you start us off, man?
Just feeling less safe and less willing to walk around in public.
Okay, so it's going to make them feel less safe. Okay, let's take that a step further, Mike. If you feel unsafe, what does that do to your behavior?
You probably won't go to where you feel unsafe.
Okay, so you're limiting your freedom, you're limiting your movement. What else are you limiting?
Maybe just your identity and being able to do those things as part of yourself, the normal things.
Okay, what is it going to do to your ability to meet people?
Decreases.
Yeah. Okay, so you feel unsafe, which restricts your movement, and it also restricts your socialization. It restricts your ability to socialize with people. Okay, what else? Pooja, what else do we have? What is the other psychological issue?
Part of you is probably going to start thinking that like it's normal just because it's like so pervasive. It's going to be almost like secondhand. So even when it goes away, you might keep having those behaviors, even if people are saying, no, you don't have to.
That's absolutely correct. Do you guys have a hard time hearing Pooja also? Yeah, okay. So Pooja says that you're going to start to think that this is normal, right? You start to think that the oppression is normal, that the power dynamic and the oppression is normal. I use the word oppression. Pooja didn't use that word, but I think I'm on track with what she said. That the oppression is normal, right? So you start to view the injustice as a normal thing, right? It clouds your ability to recognize what justice is. Okay? I don't think we've truly reached the biggest issue. What's the biggest issue that we still haven't reached yet? Yeah, go. Yeah, Kira?
Like self-hatred, because like you'd always be resenting something. You're either resenting the authority that's keeping you down and you're kind of always on the defense, or you're resenting yourself and people like you because you're starting to believe that
Yeah.
you are in fact less than.
That's absolutely correct, right? That you're going to have self-hatred and a damaged self-image. Self-hatred and a bad self-image, where you are going to view yourself as inferior. Okay. The result here, suicide rates rise, alcoholism rates rise, abuse rises, crime rises, right? All of those things, substance abuse, suicide, violence, all of those things are not the cause of danger or the cause of problems. They're all the effect of problems. Those are behavioral manifestations of what's going on. That damaged self-image is going to produce substance abuse. That damaged self-image is going to produce broken families, or it's going to produce self-destructive behavior, or it's going to produce violence, or it's going to produce all those things, right? People will mistakenly on the outside look at it and see, oh, look, Black people are violent. That's the proof. That's why we should have the segregation. No, the Black people are violent because the segregation has dictated this behavior within them. Does that make sense? Don't flip cause and effect on this, okay? Segregation is the cause of all of these effects, okay? All right, there's another part of this too. How does segregation change the relationship between parent and child? Yash, what do you think, man? The relationship between parent and child.
I think like parents would try to want the best for their children, but so they would try to teach them to be safe, and in that way they're like limiting their opinion almost. Like they're taught to not act and to stay safe, I guess.
Yeah. So so you guys know what if I use the phrase, if I say the mother took her son aside and had the talk. She had to have the talk with Michael after the encounter he had in high school. Right? What does that mean in that context? If I say the Black mother, after seeing her son in high school, she had to take him aside and have the talk. In that context, what does that mean? Drew, you know what that means? You guys have never heard that before? Or you think you've heard it, but you don't know? Okay, so in this case, the talk, put it in quotes. Okay, so the talk is something that Black parents have to have with their children, where they teach their children how to navigate through society safely. Where they teach their children how to navigate through society safely. Gentlemen, this is something that I'd be willing to bet both Kira and Pooja have had to have some version of this with their parents, right? Am I right? Ladies, I'd be willing to bet that you both have had some kind of talk with your mother or whatever female guardian that feeds you, right? With your mother, where she warns you about certain kinds of men and warns you about, going out on dates or going to parties or going to stuff. Am I right? Kira, Pooja? Yeah. Gentlemen almost never get this version, right? But women intimately know what we're talking about. Okay. Yeah. So this is the same version of that talk, right? Only it's race. Okay. Children are forced to learn code switching. That's the next term you need. Children are forced to learn code switching. Have you guys heard that phrase before? Do you know what code switching is?
It's like acting one way with one group of people and acting another way with a separate group.
Yep, that's perfect. Acting one way with one group of people and acting a different way with a different group of people, right? People will call this acting white, right? Acting white. They'll say, when you're around white people, you got to talk like this and you got to, act like this. But when they're around Black people, they act and talk differently. Okay, that's what code switching is. Women also have to code switch, right? Because women will be in the workplace and a woman has to be very careful not to be too smart, right? Not, she can't be too smart. She can't be too assertive, right? Because otherwise she's a bitch, right? It's not fair, but it's how people phrase things, right? But she also can't be too weak because then people will walk all over her, right? She has to walk this very teeny tiny little line where it's acceptable for her to be smart, but it's not so, she's not so smart that she offends all those, you know, fragile men that she's around, right? Pooja, Kira, am I too far off? Yeah, again, this is something that you would have had to have learned as girls, right? As little girls. And I'm sorry to say, as you grow into women, you're going to have to relearn this over and over again. I'm sorry. Sorry. Yeah. But this is going to be true for you know, anyone who is a unprivileged group, right? The non-privileged group. Okay. All right. Let's go to the whites now. Okay. How does segregation damage white people? How does it hurt white people? I think we know how it benefits white people, right? Money, 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 cash money, houses, cars, planes, money, right? Money. Did I mention money? Yeah. But how does it hurt white people? Yeah, sure.
It just makes them really ignorant to like what other cultures and what other people are like.
Okay. All right. So it's a barrier. It becomes a barrier for them learning about other people. It becomes a barrier to learning about other people. Yeah, Rachikanda.
It gives them a false sense of superiority.
Okay. A superiority complex. If blacks are given an inferiority complex, whites are giving a superiority complex. Okay. Let's take that one step further, right? If the inferiority complex of blacks increases behavior like suicide, addiction, all those other issues, what does the superiority complex produce? Yeah, go Drew.
It produces things like lynching and stuff like that.
Okay. Okay, what else? Yeah, sure.
Like corruption.
Okay. All right, so let's link it to identity. Okay. How are whites going to react when they feel like their identity is challenged? Right. This gets us into where Drew was going. Drew was linking it to the violence, right? So the superiority complex is going to make them more prone to violence, and they're going to harden them to change. So it'll make it more difficult for them to accept change, and it will force them to become defensive, right? White people become really, really defensive over stuff they don't need to be defensive about, right? Like the threshold for, you'll see this, the threshold for white people becoming defensive is an incredibly low threshold. I'm speaking in generalities, of course, but I am a middle-aged, bald white man, so I'm what people would look at me and assume that I'm a problem. What they don't know is that I'm all sorts of other problems. All right, so, okay, what other issues hurts them? Ilha, what else? How else does segregation hurt whites?
Like just having like segregated laws like kind of forces like the children who originally don't have those racist ideals to become racist kind of.
Okay.
Due to all the social pressure.
Okay. So it propagates the mental illness of racism. It propagates the mental illness of racism. And with that, it also degrades their ability to think rationally. It degrades the ability to think rationally. Because if you accept racism as true, you end up having to accept all sorts of other irrational things as true, right? Because all the proof in front of you is that racism should not be true, but you accept it anyway, right? It gets you in the habit of accepting other things without evidence. okay? There's one last thing that we need to deal with. It also gives them a false sense of entitlement because they get used to getting things that they don't deserve. They're used to getting things that they don't deserve, and so it gives a false sense of entitlement. Okay, this is what we would call privilege. This is where white privilege comes from. And I believe I said this right in the very first day or close to the first day, is that equality looks like oppression to people who are used to privilege. Equality looks like oppression for people who are used to privilege. I had somebody argue with me just the other day that when President Trump nominated a woman to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I kid you not, no joke, the guy turned to me and he said, why do women keep thinking that they need to take things from us? Don't they already know there's a couple of women on the Supreme Court anyway? Why do they keep needing to take things? No joke, the dude said that to me. And I was like, I didn't even really know how to respond. And I said, yeah, women are people. That's all I said. And I just kind of walked away. I said, yeah, women are people. And I just walked away because I didn't know what else to do, right? I wanted to just kind of smack him and walk away, but I was so flabbergasted with how stupid that is. Think about the mental illness that has to be involved in that man's brain to think that that is a correct statement to make. Right? You know what Ruth Bader Ginsburg responded when they asked her, this will be I'll leave you with a Ruth Bader Ginsburg thing. When they asked her, they said, how many women do you think is the right amount to have on the Supreme Court? Right? She said, well, I think that we should have a court of all women for about 200 years, and then you can ask me that question. Which is a pretty good answer, I thought. Yeah. All right, I am stopping the recording.